Sunnahfollowers, protectors of the Sunnah. Sunnahfollowers, protectors of the Sunnah.
Alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam Allah, wa rasulullah. Welcome to our Aqidah class. Now, this is the class whereas we are discussing what it means to believe in Allah. This is the book that's written by Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid. Yeah, this one is Kareem Abu Zaid's book. This class here. You got some trying to help the sister here. You got that? Yeah, this is the one. This is the Kareem Abu Zaid's class, which is also Aqidah. What does Aqidah mean? It means belief system. Islam is based on two sources, guys, the Quran and the authentic hadiths. The Quran is the Aqidah, the belief system of the Muslim. The hadith, are the things teaches us how to perform our obligations, how to change ourselves into that which is pleasing to Allah. So those are the two sources of Islam, Aqidah, Hadith. Okay. Yeah. So that's why we specified those two issues here. We have Quran to teach you how to read the Quran classes too. But the two most important is, first of all, Aqidah, then Hadith. Okay, you writing it down? Okay. The new shahadas. Yeah, the Arabic terms, that's why I don't use much Arabic. Yeah, I know it can confuse you. Yeah, but that's what Aqidah means. It refers to your belief system. And that's the book for this class, Get to Know Your Lord, Kareem Abu Zaid. And in this book, we're in the 5th chapter. This chapter has been focusing on the names of Allah, and how a lot of Muslims invalidate their shahada, or they invalidate their belief in Allah when it comes to his names. And what are some of the things that we discussed that people do in regards to Allah's names and attributes that in turn can invalidate your shahada? Anyone? What have we talked about? It's really just 3 things. What are the 3 things that we need to avoid when it comes to Allah's names? Because this can invalidate your belief in Allah. Who can remember? At least one of them. Take the mic.
Creating names that Allah did not say.
Okay, making up names, and how do people do that? Creating names that Allah didn't give himself. How do they do that?
Like saying, for instance, the designer, that he's a designer.
Yeah, but how does that happen?
By misinterpretation.
Exactly.
Ignorance.
Right. That's
not
it.
Knowledge.
Interpretation. Yes. Adding to or subtracting from the meaning. That's why everything, like Mukhtar was saying, everything is about the meaning, guys. It's all about understanding the meaning of this religion, the meaning of what you're saying. That's why I'm a stickler with you guys. I'm always asking y'all, don't use that Arabic here, because I know you don't know what you're saying. Tell me in English, because you don't speak Arabic. Tell me in English. It's the meaning. A lot of people misconstrue the meaning of Allah's names and attributes by adding to them or taking away from them. And when you do this totally takes you out, because you're denying what Allah says about himself. So we have to be very careful. That's why I'm always telling you guys, get a dictionary. When I teach this series, and when I'm having you guys break down the names, what do I tell y'all to do? Have a dictionary right there next to you, so you can look up the meaning of that name and then tell me how it relates to how you can apply it to yourself, and how Allah shows us that he is that. Don't add to it. Don't make up your own meanings. And a lot of Muslims do this, as you guys know. Some people through ignorance, and some do it voluntarily. We talked about how the Shiites do it voluntarily. Some Sufi groups do it voluntarily. And then there are just some uneducated Muslims that just do it out of ignorance. So we have to be careful of that. Distorting, adding to, subtracting, or distorting the meaning. And today I'm going to speak a little bit more about the names. And I really took the time to break this chapter down in plain, simple terms, because I guess some of the terminology that Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid used is a little bit strong for some of you. The vocabulary that we don't use in American English. Here this thing is again, and I don't see the thing to cut it off. I'll cut it off on the next page, inshallah. Well, there it is. Okay. And in this chapter of the book, Sheikh Kareem spoke about how to teach others, how when you're teaching others of the names of Allah, there are certain guidelines that we have to abide by. So he speaks about how to teach others of Allah by using his names and attributes, and how to teach them correctly without adding to it, without taking away from a meaning, or without distorting. And the first thing is that whoever's teaching about Allah through his names, that person must understand that his names and attributes are determined by the Quran and the Hadith only. Those are the two sources. Okay, if that name is not mentioned in the Quran, or that attribute is not mentioned in the Quran or the Hadith, then you can't make up one for him. You can't say that this is an attribute. Like Mina gave an example. You can't say Allah is the designer. Allah doesn't mention himself as being a designer in the Quran, nor does he mention himself as being a designer in the Hadith, so you can't do that. You know, there's no place for intellectual free thinking when it comes to Allah's names and attributes. They are contingent only upon evidence. Dalil. Dalil is an Arabic word that means evidence. Where is evidence taken from? Evidence is not a fatwa. Evidence is not what Google says. Evidence is what the Quran or the authentic Hadith say. Remember, guys, Allah tells us that the worst sin that anyone can commit is to speak about Allah without knowledge. In fact, Allah tells us out of all the things he hates, the thing he hates the most is for us to speak about him without knowledge. And there's a lot of Muslims today that do that. Listen to what Allah says in the interpretation of the meaning. Say, my Lord has only forbidden immoralities, what is apparent of them and what is concealed of them. He's also forbidden sins and oppression without right. And he's also forbidden that you associate with him that for which he has not sent down authority, and that you speak about him that which you do not know. And how do Muslims do this? By always talking about what you think is haram. That's why I had to tell the brother yesterday, that brother that comes in here, I don't think he'll be coming back, want to tell me what the lawful and the unlawful is. If you're going to say that something is haram, you have to bring the clear evidence. If you don't bring the clear evidence, you're speaking about Allah without knowledge. You're speaking about his religion without knowledge. Only Allah has the authority to make something haram. And Allah has told us the things that he don't mention are lawful. And everything he made lawful is good and clean. Just because you don't like something, or you don't understand something, that's your problem. But you cannot say Allah doesn't like it, so you're going to make it haram. And that's what happens. Whenever we use the word haram, you got to have evidence. I remember when I first started learning from Sheikh Morsi 20-something years ago, 25 years ago, the first thing that Sheikh Morsi taught me, he said, Sister Layla, don't ever use the word haram unless you have a clear verse that says it. He said, otherwise you're speaking about a law without knowledge and you're committing a big sin. You're saying that he said something was bad and dirty when it isn't. And I remember Sheikh Morsi also taught me, he said, I want you to do this, because I used to always use the word haram too. We all do that out of ignorance when we don't know our religion well. He said, understand that whenever you say something is haram, you're telling that person that they're going to hell. I mean, and when he told me to start thinking like that, he said, so you're telling a person they're going to hell if they eat an apple? You're telling the person they're going to hell, if they eat a potato chip? You're telling a person they're going to hell, if they don't cover up their foot. So you have to think like that. Replace the word haram with the hellfire, and that'll make you think twice. So that's how I managed to break myself out of using that word haram. Now you guys I don't use the word haram unless I know it's haram, because basically you're telling somebody that they're going to go to hell. Okay, because if it's haram, that's the possibility. So be careful of that, guys. Allah hates for us to speak about him or to speak about his religion without knowledge. If you don't know something, just say, I don't know, and go learn. But don't use that word haram. Okay? And the same with the Allah's names. If you don't know if something is an attribute of Allah, or if you don't understand a name of Allah, then just leave it at that. But don't try to add to it or create something that Allah didn't say about himself. Okay? Remember, Allah tells us in the interpretation of the meaning, and they cannot understand anything concerning Allah's knowledge, except whatever he himself chooses to reveal or help you to understand. Okay, so we have to be careful. A lot of people ask, what's the wisdom behind things? These are questions we shouldn't ask. What's the wisdom behind eating pork? Okay, we can probably think of the wisdom behind that. But most people don't know what's the wisdom behind if I'm going to make wudu over my shoes. I just simply make it over the top and not the bottom. Well, we don't know the wisdom, but and that's what happened during the time of the companions. The prophet said, if you knew, then of the reason why we make wudu over the top and not the bottom is because the earth purifies everything that crosses over it. But we wouldn't have known that unless Allah told us. And even then, some people ask today, how is it that dirt can purify something? So don't ask questions like that, because even if Allah gave us the answer like he did with the shoe, how is it that a woman can pray with mud on the hem of her dress? Because the mud is not impure. How is it that the mud is not impure, but blood is? So we wouldn't understand, even if Allah told it to us. Okay, so the same with his names. We have to accept the fact that Allah's names and attributes are only determined by him. not anyone else. That's the first rule. Also, listen to what Allah says in the interpretation, the meaning. Do not follow that which you have no knowledge of, because the hearing and the sight and the heart, all of these things will be questioned on the day of judgment. Here, Allah is telling us, if you don't know something, just say you don't know. Because if we go around guessing or saying things that's not true, we're going to be held accountable for that on the day of judgment. Remember, we talked about how on the day of judgment, we will all have to stand one-on-one before Allah with the rest of the creation watching. We will be barefoot. We will be naked. Okay? And our ears, our hands, our tongues, our feet will testify to what we said and did. So be careful, guys. Don't follow that which you have no knowledge of. If you don't know if something's haram, stay away from it. If you don't know the meaning of Allah's name, of one of his names, don't just go find out. But don't sit there and make it up. And if you don't understand how Allah has an attribute that he has, don't try to guess it. Just accept it and keep it moving. Okay? So, all knowledge, when it comes to knowledge, we refer to Allah for that. Knowledge about himself, we only refer to him. If he doesn't mention it about himself through the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad didn't mention it about Allah through the Hadith, and we just leave it alone. We cannot employ our own thoughts. We cannot make up analogies either. For example, we cannot say that Allah has the attribute of strength, since it is like the attribute of might. Nor can we say that Allah has the attribute of compassion, since it is like the attribute of mercy. We can't do stuff like that, guys. We can't make analogies like that. But unfortunately, this is very common amongst the Mu'tazila. Remember, we talked about them. That's that one group that has so many different branches. They base everything on science, analogies, theologies, and all of that. And that's why I told you guys, be careful. Be careful of these people with Islamic theology degrees. That woman that I was telling you guys about, she's just a doctor, a regular pediatrician or whatever she is, but they've now made her a scholar. She went to some school. Look at where she graduated from. Islamic theology. Anytime you guys see anyone with a degree in Islamic theology, that tells you that's Mu'tazila. And these people got a serious problem. They don't accept the qadr of Allah. They twist and turn that around. They're the ones that say Allah doesn't create evil, that we created ourselves, amongst many other things they say. And when I tell you guys, when you're doing these American online schools, there's a million of them. Look at their curriculums. They got Islamic theology. You dealing with a bunch of Mu'tazila. Okay, that's one of the true signs. Islamic theology. Followers of Ibn Sina. We don't deal with Islamic theology. There's no such thing as Islamic theology. Okay, so be careful of that. Also, the second guideline, when you're teaching about Allah, using his names, the teacher must also acknowledge that Allah's names are of the highest quality and the highest degree. What does that mean? Well, some humans may have beautiful names, such as Kareem. Kareem is a beautiful name with a beautiful meaning. Rahim, that's a beautiful name with a beautiful meaning. Or other names that have to deal with virtue, but their character cannot comprehensively and completely reflect those attributes. Let me break that down. Some people will say, you were asking, why did you name your son Kareem? Oh, it's a beautiful name, and the meaning is this, and I want my son to grow up to be kind. I want him to be generous and giving. Well, understand that as a human being, we could never be all that. Okay? Allah's names and Allah's attributes are without flaws. They come without deficiencies. Perfection belongs to Allah, not to us. And how many of you have heard people say that the reason why they name their children these names is because they want their kids to be all? No. Perfection belongs to Allah. We have to accept that. His names are of the highest quality, the highest degree. Remember, Allah says in the interpretation, the meaning, to him belongs the best of names. So call upon him using them. Okay? For example, El-Hay. Okay? This implies a complete life. That's the meaning of it. It means a complete life. One that was not precedented by nothingness. One that never climaxes. One that never needs sustenance or rest and will never come to an end. That belongs to Allah, not to us. You can't think that you would be that way. Or El-Alim. This is another one of Allah's names, one who has a complete and perfect knowledge that was not precedented by ignorance and that will never result in forgetfulness. Man forgets. Man doesn't know everything. Okay? So understand, if you name your children with these type of names, we want to try to incorporate some of those qualities within ourselves, but know that your children could never incorporate them all, because Allah's names are of the highest quality, the highest degree. And Allah gave us a great example of how to introduce the perfect nature of Allah when we're teaching people about him with Moses. Remember when Moses engaged with Pharaoh. Pharaoh said, so who is the Lord of you two, O Moses? And Moses said, our Lord is he who gave each thing its form and then guided it. Pharaoh then said, what is the case of the former generations? And Moses said, the knowledge of that is with my Lord in a record, and only he knows, nor does he forget. So when you're teaching people about the names of Allah, you explain to them, as Muslims, we're supposed to emulate Allah's names. And that's something that I try to teach you guys, how to incorporate it into yourself, but understand that you can never be Allah. You guys understand? We can never be on Allah's level or be equal to him. I'm going to work on being generous. I'm going to work on being kind, but I know that I'll never be like Allah with it. But I know that Allah is kind. Allah is generous. I want to make him pleased with me. So I'm going to work on trying to be generous, and so he can be proud of me, but I'll never be like him. So you have to explain that to people when you're teaching them about the names. And also you must know that Allah has more than those 99 names. His names are immeasurable. And we talked about this in another class that I taught. Allah has more than 100 names. And a lot of people misconstrue the meaning of that hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said Allah has 99 names, 100 minus 1. Whoever memorizes them all by heart will enter paradise. A lot of people take that hadith to mean that all we have to do is just write the names down on a piece of paper and memorize them. No. Okay, first of all, Allah's names are not limited to a fixed and definite number. And number two, it's not about writing it down, memorizing. You have to also struggle to recognize and understand the meaning. You have to struggle to call others to those names with the correct meaning. Does everybody understand that? And then you have to struggle to try to incorporate that meaning into yourself, knowing that you could never be like Allah. And that's where people lose it. Okay? And this is what we spoke about before in a previous class. And that's what the Sheikh is speaking about here in this chapter, exactly what I went over with you guys in a previous class. Okay? And you guys know that when it comes to assimilating or incorporating the meanings of Allah's names, this is very extensive and hard to do. Listen to what Sheikh Uthaymeen said. In fact, what's wrong with my computer? Uh-oh. Something happened. What happened to my PowerPoint, guys? Oh, here it is. Listen to what Sheikh Uthaymeen said. Can y'all see it? It didn't do. Okay, hold on. Something happened. Let me pop it up. Listen to what Sheikh Uthaymeen said. He said, what is meant by knowing the names of Allah is not writing them on a piece of paper and repeating them until you memorize them. As Ibn Qayyim stated, it means the following. It means to know the names and the number of names and to understand their different diverse meanings, and then to call upon Allah by using them. And we call upon Allah by praising, worshiping, and asking for his help through them. Okay? And whatever the name means, that meaning must be maintained. Okay? You don't change it. You don't add to it. You don't take away from it. For example, I remember about 20 years ago when I had the MySpace women here. This is when I had all those brothers from Texas on my website teaching. I know now what they were. I didn't know then. But I should have listened to the old man, but I didn't. But I remember one of the MySpace women got angry with me because I told her that Allah gets angry. I said, every time you guys say that Allah said something that he didn't say, you're making him angry. And I remember this woman said, astaghfirullah, Sister Layla, you're gonna go to hell. I said, I'm gonna go to hell for what? She said, Allah doesn't get angry. She said, Allah is good. She said, he doesn't get angry. She said, how man gets angry. I said, what are you talking about? I'm gonna go tell Imam so-and-so, Sheikh so-and-so, Sheikh so. That's when I had these different brothers on here. And I remember I got a phone call from two of those brothers. And I'm like, excuse me, I know what I'm teaching. I said, I know my deen, Aki. I said, if you got a problem, call Sheikh Morsi. I said, here's Sheikh Morsi's phone number. I said, I don't need you guys to correct me because I didn't say anything wrong. Allah does get angry. No, he doesn't, sister. You shouldn't say that. And I remember, when I was putting this PowerPoint together, it made me think about that. And things started clicking to me now. I said, now I see why those two brothers call me, because I see where their Aqidah is now, But we got into it, and I had to call Sheikh Morsi, on these brothers, because they got upset because I said that Allah gets angry. He does get angry. But his anger is not like ours. And that's what I was telling them. But they're going to tell me that he doesn't get angry at all. Well, here's the proof that Allah gets angry. Allah says in the interpretation, the meaning, he may punish the hypocrites, men and women, and the polytheists, men and women, those who assume about Allah an assumption of evil nature. Upon them is a misfortune of evil nature, and Allah has become angry with them and has cursed them and prepared for them the hellfire. And I remember I read this same verse. This is the same verse that I gave to those two imams who had called me. I said, read it even in the Arabic. Because even in the Arabic, it says he gets angry. And they tried to argue. I had to call Sheikh Morsi. And I remember Sheikh Morsi came in this website and gave a whole little lecture on that, you know. And even Sheikh Morsi told me back then, why are you bringing these people in here, Layla? And stuff is starting to make sense to me now. I see what I should have seen back then. But some of the Mu'tazili guys, that group, the Qadariyans and Mu'tazili, that group, they believe that Allah doesn't, get angry, that Allah doesn't love. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, that Allah doesn't love. They have these type of beliefs. Allah does love, but his love is not like ours. Allah does get angry, but his anger is not like ours. And what do I mean when I say his anger is not like ours? When we get angry, we hold grudges. When we get angry, we can become oppressive and unjust. When Allah gets angry, it doesn't lead to injustice or anything bad. That's the difference. Okay? The anger is one of the noble attributes of Allah. And it is incorrect to change the meaning of anger in this verse, to replace it with punishment. And that's what those brothers tried to do to me that time. And when I put this together, I said, that's what these two dudes was talking about. Many people misinterpret this verse based on the understanding that anger is a sign of weakness in humanity, and therefore it's not befitting of Allah. What Allah has stated should be accepted with the qualification that his anger is not like ours. And when I read this just reassured me even more that Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid, he's one of my dudes. He's a keeper because he understands this. Those brothers in Texas that I was dealing with back then that called me, they didn't. They tried to make it like I committed a big sin and I was an innovator and a heretic because, and they tried to change that word to something else. Subhanallah, subhanallah. It made me have that flashback when I put this PowerPoint together. Okay, remember guys, Allah loves, Allah hates. Hate is one of Allah's attributes too, but his love, his hate, his anger is not like ours. And that's based on this evidence here. There is nothing like him. He is the all-seeing, the all-hearing. So we don't take his attributes and misinterpret the meaning of them and change them, nor do we liken them to ourselves. Because when we get angry, we transgress the limits. And finally, when teaching others about Allah's names, remember that each name is inclusive of an attribute, but it is not vice versa. In other words, the attributes are not inclusive of a name. And we talked about that yesterday. And this rule is very important. For example, we can't call Allah the deceiver, like Sister Mina was saying in her answer today. We can't call Allah the plotter because none of this evil belongs to him. And this is what a lot of those Mu'tazili do. Okay? So understand, if Allah can plan, Allah can plot, Allah can do whatever he wants to do. But do we refer to him as having with those names? No, unless he gives it to himself. Does everybody understand that? And this is from that verse where Allah was speaking about the unbelievers. He said the unbelievers plotted against Jesus, but Allah caused their schemes to fail because Allah is the best of all plotters. Okay, that's not a name. So we cannot go around calling Allah the plotter because he's the best of all plotters. He didn't give that to himself as a name. He gave it to himself as an attribute. Okay? So we have to keep that in mind. So these are 5 of the guidelines that we have to keep in mind when it comes to teaching or educating others about Allah using his names. And I took the time today to try to take that part of the chapter and explain it. And I hope I did. I hope it makes sense to you. Tomorrow, there are 5 other guidelines that the Sheikh listed. I'm going to break them down like I did this too to help you to understand too. So I'm going to stop right here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Are there any questions? Did I make this understandable? Okay. Any questions?